Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.
And you're very welcome back to Tip Today, 1800 938 007. Now it's time to have a look at what's happening globally. Glad to be joined as usual on a Monday by Thomas Conway of the Nina Guardian. Good morning to you, Thomas.
Good morning, Fran.
And good to see you today. We're going to go to Chile first of all, and tell us what's happening there.
Yes, indeed. So Chile is going down a new president. He's not just a conservative right-wing politician. He's a hyper-conservative. I've heard him referred to. His name is Jose Antonio Cast, and last night he garnered about 58% of the vote and won the presidential election, the second round. Now, he was expected to emerge as the winner, it should be said. He was up against a woman called Janet Jara of the Communist Party. And I suppose the label communist alone would be enough to put off many Chilean voters. But she did get through the first round. I think her problem was that she was too much associated with the incumbent president, a man called Gabriel Boric, and he has struggled to get a hold of the country over the past couple of years. So the Chileans have opted to lurch to the right, and that is a trend reflected across South America in recent times. You know, at the start of the 2000s, there was a kind of a shift to the left in South America. They call it the pink tide because there was a wave of left-wing leaders who got elected. It didn't really work out, and now, some 2 decades later, the continent is kind of lurching to the right. We see with...
So it's a polar system.
Indeed, indeed.
And is there any question of centrist politics in any of these places, no?
Is centrist, like, I mean, to an extent they seem to have failed, because obviously this issue, and it's similar to a lot of countries in Latin America, the two issues that dominated the election campaign were crime and immigration. So Chile has about 300,000 immigrants. Many of them have come from Venezuela, have fled the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, and this guy Cast has taken a hard line on them. He's promised to send some of them back. He's promised to increase investment in the prison system, and a whole load of security measures.
So shades of Mr. Trump here.
Shades of Mr. Trump. And Mr. Trump will be delighted that Cast has been elected because they are, I suppose, like-minded ideologically. Trump is obviously looking to push his vision of conservative leaders around the world. So I expect, relations with the White House and the Chilean government to get off on a good start or on the right foot here. But it is very interesting. You look at the continent, you look at Javier Milei in Argentina. He's kind of a right-wing libertarian. The other guy, Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, who has been really, really tough on crime. And actually has been quite successful. He's actually quite popular in a country that is plagued by violence, but of course he's using all sorts of extrajudicial means.
And what Mr. Trump would like to see happen in Venezuela, then of course, would be a move to the right too.
Yeah, indeed. And as we alluded to last week, Maria Corina Machado is there kind of waiting in the wings to take power if indeed Trump does force Maduro out of office, and that would be a hugely significant moment both for Venezuela and I think for the US as well, for them to intervene like that. But they're coming increasingly close to doing so. Right.
Cast is going to have a difficult time though. I mean, that huge surge in criminality, particularly I suppose drug-based.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And it's, as I say, it's similar across the continent. Narcotics and illegal narcotics, are flowing ad infinitum in Chile. And in many ways it has ravaged a lot of the society. But Cast positioned himself as the candidate who would tackle this. He has promised to tackle the drug trafficking networks, the organised crime networks, and something tells me he'll be true to his word. He is quite conservative. He will be very socially conservative as well. That's another thing to say about him. Very hardline stance on abortion, completely anti-abortion, even in cases of rape, and would kind of feed into that kind of religious brand of conservatism. But it is his approach to crime, and it is his approach to immigration that has really struck a chord with voters, and I think that's why he has been elected here.
And you make the point as well, this harks back to the 1970s in Chile
Yeah,
as well.
the year of
resonance
Augusto.
there, isn't there?
Yeah,
Yes.
Augusto Pinochet, the right-wing dictator. He ruled from 1973 to 1990, and Cass has said that if Pinochet were alive now, he would vote for him. It thus implying that Pinochet would be a supporter, that he's maybe trying to revive that brand of politics. Now, he was toppled after 17
Indeed.
years
Yeah.
in office. But you're right, there doesn't seem to be room for kind of a more centrist leader, even though the outgoing president, Boric, while he was left-wing, was probably more so centre-left. But his approach evidently did not work. So Costa is coming in now with a completely new brand of politics. He's kind of reinvented the right-wing populist movement in the country, and he's going to try and tackle the most prominent issues, which are crime and immigration.
The EU then to freeze billions in Russian assets indefinitely, but that's not going all that easy, is it?
No, it's not. And it's been met with resistance from Belgium, which is where the vast majority of the assets are stored. Now, while this is happening, Zelensky is today in Berlin for talks with Merz and co, the German Chancellor, and he did signal yesterday that he was willing, as we discussed off air, he was willing maybe to trade NATO membership for a potential peace deal. Now, I thought that was significant. But to get back to the assets, this is potentially crucial because there's about 210 billion euro in Russian assets stored in kind of it's known as a financial clearinghouse, call it almost a bank, called Euroclear in Brussels. Now, the Belgian government is very reluctant to allow these assets to be used to finance Ukraine in the form of a loan. European leaders like Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, wants to secure a loan against those assets.
Well, just for clarity, Belgium's issue is what? They'd be on the hook then, is that
yeah,
it?
They would be on the hook for a potential for lawsuits. And I think there have already been lawsuits filed by Moscow. So they fear that if sanctions at a future date were ever to be lifted on the Kremlin, on Russia, that Belgium would be legally obliged to pay back these Russian assets, and that is something they simply cannot afford.
So they want guarantees from the Union, I guess. Then is that?
Yeah, indeed they do, and they also their first option was that the European Union would borrow on the markets to finance this loan to Ukraine, and Ukraine is in need of a huge injection of cash.
Yeah,
I mean, as we said, the frozen assets 210 billion. The EU has promised in this loan to loan at 90 billion over the course of 2 years. So that's 45 billion a year. But if you look at it, Ukraine needs something like 150 billion to keep going over the next 2 years. To finance the reconstruction, you're talking 450, 500 billion. So you're talking eye-watering amounts of money, and it just, for me, it emphasises how sustainable is this.
And you would wonder that, wouldn't you? But it's gone beyond really Ukraine's security now. This is about European Union security.
Yeah, I think it is.
And that's why there's this.
Yeah, and that is why we are seeing Merz in particular and Starmer and Macron push so hard now, because there's a realisation there. I mean, you see the Russian drone incursions and obviously the ships off our waters, and to me they're clearly launching kind of a hybrid war on the continent. Now, those Eastern European states, which would be, I suppose, haunted by their past in the Soviet Union, are very hawkish on Russia, and you would understand that, and the main powers in Europe have taken a similar line. But it's quite Russia poses an existential threat to the continent. There's no doubt about that. We can see that from their meddling in elections and from their invasion of Ukraine. But I think it's critical that the Ukraine issue is settled in a just and fair way. It's just how to do that is ultimately the main question here. Does Ukraine concede territory? I mean, Zelensky says you would have to change the constitution. In order to do that, there would have to be a referendum. To be honest, I can't see a way forward without Ukraine conceding parts of that Donbass region. I don't think it should have to concede the entirety of it.
Which is what the Russians
but I think what Russia have in control, I'm not sure Ukraine is ever going to get that back.
Right. And do I get the impression that Zelensky is willing to leave the lines where the battle lines are now, possibly.
Yeah, and I think that is probably the most probable outcome here.
But that's not enough for the Russians, is it?
No, the Russians want to take more, and Vladimir Putin wants the entirety of the Donbass region, which is that region in eastern Ukraine. He wants that in full. And, you know, all of this happens against the backdrop of major strikes. There was 4 killed yesterday. You know, I'm sure we'll see more fatalities today. So Russia is pounding. And ultimately, Ukraine is being battered at the front. And that's through no fault of their own. They fought valiantly. But they just do not have the finances to sustain this. Russia, as I said a couple of weeks ago, has gained an upper hand in the kind of drone war, which is taking place on the front lines. And they are, I think, slowly taking control of this conflict because they're willing to expend men and money in order to do so.
And what about Orban's objection to this? How are they getting around that?
Yeah, there was actually a deal reached over the weekend.
This is Viktor Orban.
This is Viktor Orban, the Hungarian leader, who is, I suppose, almost pro-Kremlin, very friendly towards Moscow. He's joined by the Slovakian leader Robert Fico, who would be friendly towards Moscow as well. And they have kind of got in the way of the various sanctions packages because the sanctions packages require unanimity in order to be passed. So in other words, they need each and every European leader to pass them.
Yes. So he's a veto.
So he has a veto. Now, he hasn't, as I understand, vetoed a sanctions package so far, but it is a constant threat. Now, he is under pressure at home. There's an opposition guy there.
Over the weekend, a lot of protests.
And an opposition leader called Peter Magyar, who looks to be making shapes and could potentially topple Orban, but certainly his attitude towards the Kremlin does not go down well in Europe, and needless to say, does not go down well in Ukraine. Both himself and Fico have cultivated ties with Moscow, and that has made life difficult for the European Union. But it looks like they will be able to get around it. The question is whether they will finance this new loan, which I think is crucial for Ukraine's survival.
All right, let me take a break, Thomas. We'll be back with more global news in just a moment. And Thomas Conway is still with me. We're talking about global news, but just in case I forget, I want to say a very, very special, happy, would you believe, 109th birthday to Eileen Hines of the Heath in Roscrea, seemingly the oldest person in Ireland, and lots of love coming in from all of Eileen's family today. And Eileen, we wish you the very, very best indeed, and a very happy Christmas to you. And it's nice to hear that you listen to the radio station as well, and thank you for that. Thomas, we're going to talk about Thailand and Cambodia now. This was another peace deal that was done by Mr. Trump and his acolytes, wasn't it? But it's falling apart.
Yeah, suddenly all these peace deals seem to are becoming quite fragile, are being exposed as quite fragile. So he struck a peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia during the summer. It shares essentially a 700-kilometre border, which there have been disputes and fights, and they have traded blows, the two militaries, across the border for years. It was drawn up by the French in 1907, a French cartographer, and since then it has been kind of a disputed zone. But this July, anyway, President Trump brokered a ceasefire. There was a signing ceremony a couple of weeks ago when Trump was in Southeast Asia, and things looked to be going merrily. But over the past week, a dispute was essentially ignited by what you would think is a minor incident. Last Sunday week, a Thai engineering team was working on an access road in the disputed area of the border area. And according to the Thai army, it was fired on by Cambodian troops. But of course, the Cambodians deny this, and they argued that it was Thailand who fired the first shots. So it kind of escalated over the course of the past few days. Now, Trump has implored both sides to stop fighting, and it doesn't do his reputation any good at all when he sees these
as the great peacemaker.
Indeed, but confrontations have continued on the border. Now, both countries face domestic challenges. As you can imagine, both were were absolutely rocked by tariffs earlier in the year. And of course, Trump wielded the tariff stick as a means of getting them together. So both were fairly reluctant. Thailand in particular was reluctant to sign up to the peace agreement, but essentially it had to, because Trump was going to impose extremely punitive tariffs on it. Cambodia, slightly happier to welcome the outside intervention, because it is the smaller country and it feels at a military disadvantage here.
So Thailand is the dominant force here.
Thailand is the dominant force, and it's under a new Prime Minister, Arnutin Shirvarakul, and he heads a minority coalition which has essentially been beset by problems. So he has let this one go to the military. He's basically given the military carte blanche, essentially, to conduct their actions as they see fit. And of course, a lot of the Thai public actually support intervention here. They're quite frustrated at the situation, quite sick and tired of these border disputes, and they're supportive of the military campaign. Cambodia, on the other hand, there's kind of a complex domestic situation in Cambodia. The Prime Minister is a guy called Hun Manet, but he's essentially the protege of his father, Hun Sen, who was the former Prime Minister. Now, there was a massive furore earlier in the year when Hun Sen was reported to have had relations, almost familial relations, with a former Thai Prime Minister, as in he was like an uncle to her. She was, looking for advice off him. So very strange. There are two powerful families, one in Thailand, one in Cambodia. And I suppose they developed relations over the years. And it's a really unusual kind of state of affairs there. It was one of the reasons why that former Thai Prime Minister was booted out of office. So the public in Thailand in particular were not happy with this. But the question is, can Trump clamp down on this and bang heads together again and broker some kind of deal? Thailand has repeatedly said it's not ready for diplomacy, and Cambodia, it says, must show sincerity before it is ready to try for a ceasefire again. So what all that means is a little bit uncertain. But this does not do that part of the world any good. It's Southeast Asia. A lot of people will go to visit. A lot of people would go on holidays there, tours there, and it harms the reputation of the country if effectively they are at war. The two of them.
Of course, when you mention Cambodia, we all think of the killing fields.
The killing fields, indeed,
Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot, was it?
Yeah, the dictator, yeah.
Yeah, dreadful tragedies there over the. So we're not sure what the outcome of that is going to be.
No, it's shady. I mean, Trump again will probably wield the tariffs as a mechanism of bringing the two countries to the table, and maybe he will squeeze through some sort of a deal. But certainly, as we kind of talked off air, you look at the Gaza ceasefire, that's quite fragile. Yeah. We're going to mention another one in Rwanda in a minute, which is on shaky ground as well. This, and then he hasn't solved, obviously, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So suddenly his reputation as a great peacemaker, and he was bragging about it in the Oval Office over the weekend, doesn't quite lie in tatters, but it is certainly quite fragile. And you would have to question the solidity of the peace deals he's striking. These are complex international conflicts, and they cannot just be resolved in a couple of days. In
a deal, as he says. Yeah, the shooting at Brown University in Providence in Rhode Island as well. Very, very unfortunate what happened there as well.
Yeah, I suppose this, it has been eclipsed obviously by that awful shooting on Bondi Beach that you talked about earlier in the programme. But this was another shooting at Brown University in Rhode Island. Left 2 people dead and 9 injured. Police searched the campus for a male dressed in black, but have not yet made an arrest. Trump was fully briefed and students were ordered to shelter. So I was watching this on CNN last night, and it is one of over 70 school shootings that have occurred over the past, I suppose, couple of decades or 2 decades. An all too common occurrence, and it obviously reignites the whole debate around firearms, which is going to, which Australia is going to have now as well. But in the United States, I suppose the attachment to the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms is so strong that I'm not sure this will precipitate any change. You'd
wonder what will precipitate change there as well. I wasn't across what was happening in Belarus. What happened there?
To the credit of the Americans here, there was a another prisoner release deal. Belarus released 123 prisoners as part of an American broker deal, and among those freed, significantly, were Alex Bialyatsky, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and Maria Kolesnikova, who's a prominent political activist. Now, this was actually quite the coup for the United States, because in return for lifting some sanctions, the Belarusian leader, Andrei Lukashenko, said he would release these prisoners who obviously had been incarcerated off the back of widespread protests over the election in 2019. So it's significant that those two individuals were freed. There were kind of scenes of jubilation in Minsk, the capital, over the weekend. And it is kind of one of the few brighter stories of the past weekend. So, you know, it's...
What does Russia think of that, though?
I'm not entirely sure, but I would suspect it is not happy whatsoever. Russia kind of has left...
Belarus is the great ally, isn't it?
It's the great ally, but Lukashenko kind of does his own thing in Belarus. Vladimir Putin supports him because Lukashenko gives support to the Russian invasion, and that's why the sanctions were imposed by the West. But he is certainly not as strong a leader, or doesn't have as strong a grip on power as Vladimir Putin does in Russia. That goes without saying, and that was evident in the last election. And obviously Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, whose ties to Tipperary,
yes.
You know, so it's quite evident that he, you know, I think the moment for insurrection or for revolution in Belarus has probably passed, and we will get a couple more layers of Lukashenko, unfortunately. But certainly he's on shakier ground than, say, Vladimir Putin. Interesting.
Now, you alluded to that Rwandan situation. Will you just bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, so M23, who are a Rwandan-backed militia group, seized a city in the eastern Congo. And this came days after Mr. Trump brokered a peace agreement between Congo and Rwanda. The deal compels Rwanda to stop supporting the militia group, and they're eating into the eastern side of the Congo, but it's done little to halt its offensive in the mineral-rich region. And Mike Waltz, the American ambassador to the UN, has expressed, you know, what can only be construed as huge frustration at the United Nations. He said that Rwanda was leading the region towards instability and war. And obviously this is another conflict in kind of the heart of Africa that is not being resolved and that is festering and being allowed to fester. So, you know, you join conflicts in Sudan, Ethiopia, yes, and the Tigray region, and obviously now in that eastern part of Congo. So, you know, things not going well from a peace perspective in terms of Donald Trump either.
Yeah, and just a quick word on what happened on Bondi Beach. Just the anti-Semitic attack, and we see the Gardaí now are upping security around Jewish celebrations in Ireland, for example. You'd have to be concerned. You would have to be concerned.
It's absolutely shocking. I mean, it was appalling what happened yesterday in Bondi, and I think, you know, terrifying for all those involved. And were it not for the intervention of that guy, you know, many more could have been killed.
Absolutely.
But I think it does. It is part of a trend. I think there has been a rise in anti-Semitic incidents over the past few years since October 7th. I think people have wrongly conflated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. So yes, they see just because you're a Jew, that you're immediately supportive of what the Netanyahu government is doing, and that is simply not true. I mean, a lot of Jewish people are supportive. Many aren't, though,
Many aren't indeed. And I was making that point to Ryan O'Mara earlier on. Is it important in the rhetoric now to point that out?
I think it has to be. I think it has to be highlighted because, you know, we can get into this this attitude of groupthink very quickly, and it's very easy to tar everyone with the same brush. But there are Jewish people out there who would abhor what is happening or what has happened in Gaza and would completely condemn the Israeli government. We have to remember that the Israeli government is actually, in Israeli domestic political terms, is quite extreme. You know,
very right wing.
Very right wing, and so there's a lot of people there, probably within Israel, which would be opposed to what it's doing.
Well, we've seen the protests within Israel.
Yeah,
indeed.
It's worth mentioning that there were people killed in Gaza over the weekend as well. Sure. So there are two sides to it, but certainly I think anti-Semitism is repugnant and it's not acceptable, and this attack was completely egregious.
All right, Thomas, pleasure as always. Thank you so much. Thomas Conway there of the Nina Guardian. News and information is coming.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.